Hello and welcome to the Horn Call Podcast, the official podcast of the International Horn Society. My name is James Bolden, publications editor for the IHS and your host for today's podcast. I'm not a fan of really long podcast introductions, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to make sure and get to our awesome guest today, but I thought I would share a couple of things with you here in episode 2. As I record this is in late August, and we are already in the final stages of preparation for the October 2020 issue of the Horn Call. I think we are on track for getting that issue out the door and to your inboxes and to your mailboxes on schedule. So before I go on to any other announcements, I have to say in the last couple of months, I have learned what an incredibly interesting and awesome job it is to help put together a journal like the Horn Call. And to be quite honest, I don't know how my predecessor, Bill Scharnberg, balanced all of the amazing things he was doing with his other professional activities, as well as putting this journal together. I got to give a big shout out to Bill Scharnberg. You're amazing, man. You're awesome. Another quick shout out, if you liked episode 1, my interview with Andrew Pelletier, and you noticed the transition and outro music, that was a horn quartet recording that we did virtually this summer with my colleagues in the Shreveport Symphony Orchestra. That was a movement from the Cherepnin Horn Quartets. That was La Chasse. The members of that section are Tom Hundemer, principal, Adam Black, second, Christine Carell, third, and me, James Bolden, fourth. And we did that whole performance and recording virtually using our smartphones and other technology at home, as I'm sure you've seen many of those. And that was a fun way for us to collaborate musically, albeit in a virtual way, and to maintain some contact with our audiences out there. I mentioned that this intro is being recorded in the last part of August in Louisiana, my home state. We are still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Laura, a number of really serious consequences of that hurricane that folks are still dealing with: loss of life, loss of power, loss of homes and other property. So be thinking about us, and my heart goes out to anyone who was affected by Hurricane Laura, and so we hope to be back on our feet as soon as possible. And then the last thing I want to say before we get to our guest today is to be sure, if you are an IHS member, to go check out the IHS virtual workshop at hornsociety.org. There are hours of amazing content here that is provided for IHS members. It's in lieu of the 52nd International Horn Symposium, which unfortunately had to be canceled because of COVID-19, but the team of Lydia Van Driel, Dan Phillips, and Jeff Snedeker put together an amazing virtual workshop, complete with an exhibit hall and lots of great presentations. So I hope that you will continue to check that out. It's not going to be available forever. It's only going to be available for a limited time. So if you have an interest in anything like that, please make sure to go to hornsociety.org. And without further ado, my guest today is a prize-winning composer and hornist from Portugal, Ricardo Matosinhos. And I think you're going to really love our conversation today. We touched on all manner of topics. His interest in composing. He's written a number of etude books. He's an awesome horn player and an awesome teacher. And he's also working on his PhD, as if all of the other things he was doing weren't enough. So without further delay, here is our interview with Ricardo Matosinhos. And my guest today, we are very pleased to be speaking with Ricardo Matosinhos from Portugal. Thank you so much for being here, Ricardo.
It's an honor for me and a pleasure to speak with you after all these years speaking by email.
Yeah, that's right. I was thinking about this the other day. I think I first heard from you maybe about 10 years ago,
Yeah,
something like that.
maybe when my etudes were published.
You were so kind and generous, and you sent me, copies of them, and they were just fantastic. You're widely published now. You've written a bunch of different etude books, and you've got some really great videos up on YouTube of you performing, as well as I think people will probably be most familiar with you either through your etude books or through the Matosinhos Challenge. Do you want to talk a little
Yes,
bit about that and kind of explain, because you've done this a couple times now?
yes, with different ideas about it. The first competition, Matosinhos YouTube competition,
Hmm.
was the first name. Back then, I published my first book of etudes. Then the second and third book were already written, and I talked with the publisher about the idea of making an international competition. This way, people could play the etudes, have fun, and so it would be win-win for everyone.
Yeah, and people from all over the world participated, from not just from Portugal, but from all
Yes,
over.
from all over the world, there were participants. Then a few years later, there was a second competition when fourth book was released. And now with this pandemic, I had the idea in May to do a Matosinhos challenge over the Facebook.
And that was based on an excerpt from one of your etudes, right?
Yes, it was one etude from the low horn etudes. So the idea was everyone is at home, everyone is trying to keep in shape, wondering when the next concert will be. So it's a perfect opportunity to people have fun playing the etudes, also for promoting the etudes. Again, it will be win-win, and the response of the people was very interesting. I had people saying, um, I knew I had to work on the a low horn range, but this was the perfect excuse to work on this range.
Yeah, absolutely. And the level of playing was incredibly high. I mean, they're such great players, people I had heard of, and then people I didn't know, just from all over the world. So that was really cool. I want to talk a little bit about how the pandemic kind of unfolded in Portugal. But before we do that, for people who might not be familiar with your etudes, could you talk a little bit about how many you've written? It's been, 5 or 6 books, I think, something like that.
There are four books of
Hmm.
etudes, and there is also a book for beginners that has 20 easy etudes.
Okay, yeah, and you've won prizes from the International Horn Society for your compositions.
Yes, the low horn etudes received an honorable mention in one of the International Horn Society composition contests, and two other of my pieces also received prizes. It was the Reflections for horn solo, and the piece The Horn Calls You Back for two horns and piano.
Yeah, I certainly want to talk about those a little bit more as well. And so your etude books are, in my experience, they're really fun. They're fun to play, but very challenging. And I remember when you sent them to me, you had recorded all of them, so you can actually play everything in the book, which is fantastic. They cover kind of an unusual area for horn players, right? Some of them are quite jazz influenced.
Yes, there is some jazzy influence. Probably this is due to Arkady Schildklopper.
Hmm.
I remember the first time I heard Arkady Schildklopper was, whoa, the horn can do that. So it was a great influence for me. And I was having some jazz lessons with a saxophone player. not to in order to play in a jazz group, but in order to know a little bit more the jazz world. And the first of the books was composed around that time. But the jazzy style has another idea. Sometimes we know what we need to work on the horn, but we are just waiting for the perfect excuse. So because etudes are fun, people dare to try them and to work on those passages that we know we need to practice them. But if the etudes are quite boring and difficult, no one will practice them. If they are difficult but fun, okay, we have the perfect excuse.
No, absolutely. And yeah, I think you've hit the mark exactly. And these etudes, they're certainly suitable for public performance. You could use them in a recital or a concert or in a YouTube challenge,
Yes.
as you did. Yeah. So that, but they also are, really good for working on some techniques of horn playing that we might not be exposed to otherwise. You don't necessarily run across this kind of stuff, jazz articulations, multiphonics, glissandos, half valve, those sorts of things you're not going to run into in Coprash.
Yeah, but actually, relating, for example, on the multiphonics, of course, they are cool to play. And in the horn repertoire, uh, we need them for Weber, a few contemporary pieces, and nothing more. But I find them very interesting to control the aperture,
Mm-hmm.
because if you want to play multiphonic, you use the same air both for singing and playing. So in order to play a multiphonic, people learn how to control the aperture. And then even if they are playing without multiphonics, it is easier to focus the sound. Also, in some etudes, the multiphonics are by the end. It's like a carrot. If you play this etude, by the end there will be a small multiphonic.
That's right, and it also develops the ear because you're having to, hear those intervals above the
Yes,
notes that
yes.
you're singing. So no,
Kind of
that's
like the this book by Lewy.
mm-hmm.
It has also multiphonics in the end.
Oh, as sort of the reward.
Yeah.
No, well, that's fantastic. So you've got the low horn etudes, the jazzy etudes. Any projects you're currently working on in terms of more compositions or etudes?
I have another etude written. Probably it will be included in another book. But right now I'm trying to finish my PhD thesis, so I have a lot of work now. But probably there will be another book. I have a book of exercises that is written about uh, 10 years ago.
Mhm.
It was written 10 years ago. Um, but I'm now trying to find time to finish the project. It's
Okay.
an interesting idea. There is nothing about an exercise that tells that this exercise is difficult or easy. It depends how do you play this exercise, which tempo, dynamic, etc. If you are doing in one key, in several keys, with different rhythms, articulations, etc. So the idea, there are some patterns, some exercises, and then the way of doing these exercises will state the level of difficulty of the exercises. It's a huge project. The exercises are already written. I just need some time to after the PhD, it will be the next project.
Well, I got to tell you, Ricardo, based on what you've done so far, you've done enough for a PhD. Do you have to do a separate dissertation or a separate thesis in addition to what you've already done?
Yes, this research it will be about um, an analysis of the idiomatic elements present in a selection of pieces written by horn players.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds like a
So
PhD dissertation. But
yes.
and now you've also got a website too where you cataloged all these different etudes, right? I for some reason I was thinking that was for your PhD.
No, what was for my master.
Okay, I
For
see.
my master, this website was on Google,
Hmm.
Google Fusion. Now Google stopped the Fusion project. I'm trying now to. I was speaking with Dan about the possibility of making this project inside the International Horn Society website. So Dan is trying to figure out a way.
That would be fantastic. And especially there's a new initiative in the IHS to be more of an educational resource for not just for horn players, but for music educators, band and orchestra directors who may not be as familiar with the horn as we are, but still have to teach it. So, and to step back for a second, so why don't you talk a little bit about what that is, because not everybody knows that resource is out there, especially if so you're saying the hosting has disappeared for it, it's not up anymore.
Yes, the hosting is not available. So I spoke with Dan about the possibility of including this research project
Hmm.
in the International Horn Society website. This was done for my master and my master degree, and the research included etudes written from 1950 until 2011. And then I continue adding more etude books. On this project, there are small descriptions about every etude book, covering the range, the dynamic range, special techniques, the size of the etudes, etc. So it's a good way to know a little bit better the etudes before buying them.
Yeah, and it's a searchable database, right? You can search for a specific composer or specific book, right?
Yes, it was searchable. I'm not sure how it's gonna be now on the new project, but let's hope for the best.
Yeah, well, that's the first I'm hearing of this, and that's fantastic. I think that's really awesome. And this is Dan Phillips, who's the web manager for the International Horn Society. I'm betting Dan is going to be able to work his magic. So that's really awesome. That'll be another reason for people to go to hornsociety.org. And yeah, I didn't know that the hosting had gone away, but I have been to that resource several times through your website, and it was fantastic. So I certainly hope that it comes back up very soon. Um, so obviously this I don't know exactly when people will be listening to this. Hopefully, if it's months from now, the pandemic will be something in the past. But as of right now, when we're recording this, it is still very much a major issue around the world. How are things in Portugal right now?
uh, Things are starting to look better. 2 days ago was the first time that there was no death in one day since the beginning of the pandemic. Let's see how it goes. I feel that people are relaxing now, so I'm not sure how it's gonna be in September.
Right, right. And so it was in March, I guess, when things started getting more serious?
Yes, all over the Europe, there was this virus, but there were no virus in Portugal. People were even joking, okay, the virus doesn't want anything with the Portuguese. And suddenly, one of the first people that got infected was a musician that
Okay.
came from Italy. And suddenly, people start realizing that musicians travel a lot, and in orchestra they have contact with people that have been on a different country, and suddenly people start to be scared about it.
Right.
This was really quickly. People even they don't they were not believing on it. because it was like we were on war, but there were no bombs.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was really strange. And suddenly schools started to close. There was a lockdown, uh, kind of the same that you had in the United States. And now people are trying to get to the normal life again.
Right. Now, in terms of where were you in the school year in March? Was school about to end, or had the school year not begun yet?
There are 2 weeks holidays and around Easter, and
Okay.
this happened about 2 weeks before the holidays. So we had 2 weeks to adapt with
Hmm.
online classes. I had experience with online classes, but my students didn't, because usually I don't do online classes with my own students. So it was everything was very quickly. Um, for the older students were quite easy, not for the younger ones.
Hmm.
For the younger ones was kind of a nightmare, because they don't even know how to proper hold the horn and now how to configure the computer. So those students, they needed their parents' help
Right.
to, to help them.
Yeah. So, and this leads me to my, I guess my next question is about your article in the Horn Call about effective teaching for online lessons. So, could you talk about? Obviously, the article is a fantastic resource. I hope everyone reads it. Just some really great practical information about teaching, not just horn lessons, but this could be applicable to any kind of music teaching online. Could you talk about how you developed your strategy for teaching online and ways that you adapted to that?
The first thing I did was I called all the parents one by one, and told them I will send you an email with further instructions. I just did this call and asked them to join the Google Classroom. This way, we were every time I sent a message, I was talking to everyone. So this way, at least once, I need to call to everyone. So then I did instructions about how to set up everything. Um, and then as the lessons started to run online, I was helping the students to overcome any technical issue. The first question was about microphones, because usually students don't have a good microphone. So I told them to buy a better microphone at least. Some parents at first they thought, okay, maybe this is too much. So I started recording with the sound I was getting and telling the parents, look, this is the sound I'm getting. It is very difficult for me to give a feedback if the sound is not okay. So most of the parents understand that, and so they acquired better microphones. And from that on, the classes were almost normal. There was some adjustments we need to do. There are some latency, so you cannot clap your hands
Right.
at the same time of the students or play together. But for the older students, it was okay. And even for some students, I felt that they were practicing more on this system.
Well, that's interesting. So, what do you think about this new way of teaching resulted in the students practicing more?
The question is, you have an online class.
Hmm.
It's not so you don't you are saving some time. You don't need to get a bus to go to the class, to go to the school. So you have more time to practice at home.
I'd say that makes sense.
So
Yeah.
for the older students, for some of the older students, I felt them more concentrated about the goals of each class.
Hmm.
Of course, for some bad students, it was the same. Students that didn't practice at all wasn't this system that made them practice. But for good students, or at least students that want to improve, even if they are having difficulties, it was a good system.
No, that's really fascinating. Did you find that most of your students had a pretty good internet connection, or did it vary depending on maybe their location?
It was depending on the location, for sure. There was one or two situations where I had to do crazy connections, like uh, just having the video from the internet and
Hmm.
having the audio from a mobile phone or
Yes,
something like
yes,
that.
yeah.
So we had to adjust. For some students, we used a system of doing recordings. So in the beginning of the class, we are listening to the recording because if there are some connection problems, the recording helps to keep a better sound quality.
I see. No, that makes sense. Um, did you find yourself teaching differently, or did you pretty much do the same things that you would do if you were in the same room with the student?
I I had to adapt also.
Sure.
Usually, I was I had experience with online teaching, but just a few lessons, online lessons. Now I have a 27-inch monitor in front of me, another 13-inch monitor, and sometimes even the iPad. Uh, so if you are teaching all day online, you really need to have all the music in front of you, to share the music with the student and make some annotations, because something easy like taking a pencil and write something on the score, you cannot do it anymore.
Right.
So it is quite different. I felt about the recordings that the information that I gave to the students were more focused,
I see.
because sometimes as teachers, we give a lot of information to the students, but sometimes we can make a summary in 5 points. uh, the student missed this attack, but on the fourth stave missed this attack. So these are all about missed attacks.
Hmm.
So if you listen to the recording and again and then tell the student about the recording, you can tell the student, these were the best points. These was the points that you need to improve. So it is easier to give the message to the student.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that that was a technique that a lot of music teachers in the United States were using, is having the students record separately something, an etude or a solo or an excerpt, and send that in, and then the teacher would listen to it, and then they would meet, on online for a conversation about the recording. So that, yeah, that certainly is an effective way to do that. Um, did you find that were any students trying to use like just their phone to do their lesson, or did most all of them have a computer or tablet?
There were some students, unfortunately, with the phone. I tried to convince some of them, but sometimes it was not simply possible,
Right.
because their sisters and brothers were also having lessons online. Their parents were working online, so this was too fast, too fast. So I tried to adapt, tried to convince the students to get better gear. For those with uh, a nice microphone on the computer, it was okay.
Right. Yeah, that was my experience of it's so much depended on internet, and then what kinds of technology the students had access to. So no, that I don't think online teaching is going away. I think even in some places that are back to face learning, in the event that things were to get worse, then they have to go back to online teaching. So it's for those that have kind of resisted it, I think this was certainly a wake-up call that we kind of have to
Yes,
get ready.
for sure, the world won't be the same again.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that it will be worse. For sure, people that never had an online class tried an online class.
This is
People
true.
that never gave an online class tried for the first time. And imagine, for instance, restaurant. Some restaurants never tried the takeaway system, and some people never tried the takeaway system, and now they tried. So I think people need to adapt to this new system. It will be better. It will be different.
That's absolutely right. So we could talk about. I'm a technology person myself. I enjoy talking about it. I'm not an expert, obviously, but it's endlessly fascinating to me. Let's talk a little bit about your personal playing in on the horn. What did you find yourself doing differently or the same now, once concerts and solo performances were not possible anymore? How did you stay motivated to keep practicing the horn and to stay interested in what you were doing?
So right now I'm doing a research
Mm-hmm.
for the PhD. So I have some pieces to play, to make some analysis, not the regular analysis, but an idiomatic analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So my focus were those pieces. I already gave some recitals with some of the pieces, and there will be still some pieces that will be performed. So my goal was thinking forward to those recitals whenever they will be.
Have you thought about
But
doing any live stream of performances or anything like that?
I did a live stream actually during a week. I did some interesting stuff. On the weekends, there were people that went to the beach. So I gave some online sessions about Dorico. It's a scoring program that I'm using. Also,
Mm-hmm.
I'm certified trainer for this software. So I gave free online sessions for those who are at home and not in the beach.
I see. Is this a music notation software?
Yes, a music notation software. It was released 4 years ago. It's
Okay, and
an
it's called
amazing
Oracle.
Dorico.
Dorico. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Dorico.
yeah. I've heard of that.
And for an entire week before Easter, I did daily horn sessions during the holidays, the Easter holidays,
Mm-hmm.
horn sessions for free on the internet. So the idea was to keep my students engaged and to other students that want to practice. Of course, these were not regular lessons because I was not listening the people on the other side, but I was playing some exercises and people could ask some questions on the chat. So I, I was also having the perfect opportunity to practice some basic routines during that week with the students and everyone that wanted to listen.
Oh, that's fantastic. I was just going to ask, was the response to that pretty good?
It was very interesting. People mostly from Portugal, from Brazil, from Spain. Of course, because of the language, I was doing this in Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
But the response was very interesting. Especially, I have a good connection with Brazil. I already gave a lot of online lessons to Brazil, and some people from Brazil were asking more questions about the lessons, about some of the exercises that they were listening. So it was very interesting, and there were people that came the entire week.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, That's really good. And so are you on is school on summer vacation now, or is school still in session?
Yes, now the school is in summer vacation during August. Now I have time to to write my thesis.
And when will classes resume?
They will start again in mid-September.
Mid-September. Okay. Well, I hope that things get off to a good start when school starts back for you. And I you are an incredibly creative person. That was reading all of the things that you are doing and all of the things that you're interested in. And I studied with Douglas Hill in graduate school, and he's a composer as well. And so I was always surrounded by, um, you know, brass players and horn players specifically who were not only interested in playing the horn but interested in doing other things. So, how did you get your start in composing?
Composing. My start was about when I was 14 years old, uh, having some these regular composition lessons that every musician has. I started to make some small pieces for piano, for flute. It was interesting because on those days I didn't wrote anything for the horn. Maybe because it was probably too difficult for me. Um, but then I continue with my horn studies, and later when I started to teach, I realized that there were some aspects on the repertoire that needed some attention. For instance, easier pieces for low horn, uh, fun etudes, pieces for beginners. So then I started to compose, having my students as an inspiration for those technical exercises.
I think that's so often how it starts. We're trying to get our students to learn to do something, and so we think, well, what's a good exercise for that? And so we write down an exercise for them. And yeah, I'm not a composer by any stretch of the imagination, but I have an immense amount of respect for musicians who not only perform but also compose. So
But it's like you said about Douglas Hill, this triangle of teaching, of composing, of performing. Um, People need to compose even if they don't want to be a composers, just to know the other side.
sure.
And also for teaching, a teacher needs to perform, or else it is very difficult to say how it is to be on a stage if we don't uh, step on a stage for 20 years.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
I like very much the Douglas Hill approach on the creativity.
No, it's something that I think about a lot. Obviously, I he had a tremendous influence on me just in terms of the way I approach teaching and just my whole philosophy of music. So that's pretty amazing that we can sit here thousands of miles apart and talk about talk about Doug Hill. I don't know if he'll ever listen to this podcast.
Some of my etudes were influenced by his book. For instance, the quarter tone blues was
Mm.
influenced by the quarter tones scales on his book.
Oh,
So
the
I thought,
extended techniques.
yeah,
Yes, yes.
I thought about, okay, how can we write something on quarter tones, but not really strange music, blues, something
Hmm.
almost tonal but not quite tonal.
Right.
So an idea came from that book.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm sure he would love to hear that. Um, and who publishes your etude books?
The etude books were published by Phoenix Music Publications.
This is
Uh,
Carrie Turner and Christina Masha
Christina,
Turner's. Yeah.
now they are, yeah, now they are with Cayetana and Christina. It was very interesting that you said that I played all my etudes because the first time I was trying to get my etudes published, I sent some emails, and there was one interesting response. A publisher told me we only published music written for humans.
Oh my goodness. So they didn't think it was playable.
Yes, and it's very interesting because of all these competitions online. I think there were no aliens playing them.
No, they were all horn players, and some of them quite young. It's, as I said, the level of playing, especially in Portugal, you must be doing something right in terms of music education there. It's incredible.
Yes, there is something very special happening in Portugal. This is related with the professional schools. I studied, in a professional school. The professional schools were born in the end of the 80s or beginning of the 90s. The idea of the professional schools in most of the areas, the idea of the professional schools is, okay, you learn something for 3 4 years and you go to get a job, like for instance in tourism, like fixing cars, etc. And they opened these professional schools for the music, but no one is getting a job playing an instrument for 3 or 6 years. So this was conservatories keep having their students to the superior schools and universities, but most of the students now are arriving from the professional schools because they have more time to play an instrument, more it is more intense.
I see.
So this system started to build a lot of musicians in Portugal. Unfortunately, there are just a few orchestras in Portugal, so we start exporting musicians.
And I'm familiar with one of your colleagues, Bernardo Silva.
Yes.
He and I have chatted just a little bit on occasion because he serves on the advisory council of the International Horn Society. Yeah, he's fantastic as well.
Yes, and Bernardo is also very active with a lot of projects, very interesting projects with the horn community.
So when I got to ask, when is a horn symposium going to be hosted in Portugal, an international horn symposium? That would be fantastic.
It would be fantastic, really, really. I would say it when this pandemic is over, could be an ideal.
That would be amazing. I would certainly sign up for that. And I think that's one of the things that it's getting better, but I just think not enough people know how amazing the horn players are around the world. I mean, we get used to the people that we know, and those are the people we listen to and look at YouTube videos but there's so much good horn playing going on all over.
The question is also always about imagine for those who speak English, it's very easy to get access to everything. For those who speak Portuguese and Spanish, I know wonderful players, but they cannot speak English. Mm-hmm. So for those, it's harder to get people knowing them. So speaking English is really, really a great tool to spread the message.
Yeah. Well, we also need to learn Portuguese and Spanish. So yeah, I took some Spanish in school many years ago, but it's been quite some time. And for my doctorate, we had to take a translation class in case we ever have to translate a document. I took Italian, so I learned a little bit, but I could certainly learn a lot more in terms of other languages.
If you speak in Spanish in Portugal, almost everyone will understand you.
It's
not the
similar,
opposite.
yeah.
If you speak Portuguese in Spain, probably people won't understand.
Huh, how interesting.
Maybe this is related with the vowels. In Spanish, everything is more close, more a, e. In Portugal, we have this and a, o. So we have the vowel closed and open. And for the horn playing, this is amazing, because if you want to tell a student to open the throat, they know how to do it because of the language.
That is interesting. Well, and then yeah, I don't know if someone has done a study on this yet. It would be probably pretty difficult to figure out, but the extent to which regional and national languages affect horn playing and the sound and the tone and articulation, all of those things, it has to have an effect because it's so related to the vowels and the oral cavity, all of that stuff. So that would be, if
Yes,
somebody's looking to
probably.
do a dissertation on it,
Yeah, could be a wonderful project.
well, Ricardo, I don't want to keep you too long today. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I know one that listeners are going to be really interested in. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure.